reflecting negatively on them. So rather than figuring out, who was wrong, who did anything wrong, that's what I meant when I said a couple of minutes ago, we've got to almost reset this and say, okay, let's stop this nonsense and figure out how can we get our control over this now. So rather than these games people are playing, let's focus on that.
Dr. Fauci saying it like it is, focus on the virus, not political games. This after becoming the target of a White House smear campaign over the last few days that burst into public view. The most recent coming in very public form from trade advisor Peter Navarro, who writes today in an op-ed about Fauci, quote, he's been wrong about everything I've interacted with him on. Despite the piece coming from a high-level official very close to Donald Trump and following a pattern of efforts to undermine the country's top infectious disease fighter, the White House today says it had nothing to do with it. Even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell imploring people to listen to the experts, saying he has total confidence in Dr. Fauci. Meanwhile, one Trump-friendly governor who's been against the mandating of mask wearing and still is, today Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma, who attended Trump's Tulsa rally last month, has announced that he has tested positive for COVID-19. Sam, AB, and Dr. Hotez are still with us. Sam, it's my colleague Rachel who's been saying for 3.5 years, follow what they do, not what they say. The truth is what they are doing is publicly and privately undermining Dr. Fauci, trying to cut out the CDC, and as we've been talking about, abdicating any role in trying to seriously defeat the virus.
Yeah, completely. The idea that this wasn't, the Navarro op-ed wasn't sanctioned by the White House press shop really is almost irrelevant. They've been trying to undermine Dr. Fauci for weeks, if not months now, and scapegoat him as being part of the problem here for not having predictive capabilities about the virus, when in fact, basically, the president himself and vice president and all the people around him were terribly wrong and underestimated the virus and acted as if it would go away on its own. But I think Dr. Fauci's right. We're in a point now where that's irrelevant. We need to sort of focus on what we do going forward. And herein lies the problem, which is that there's just simply no long-term strategic planning from the president on this stuff. I think realistically, the doctor could tell me if I'm wrong here. And now you would be having some serious conversations about going back into lockdown in some of the hot spots, having 2 to 3 month planning out, devoting resources to schools so they could, staff up and get ready for the influx of children. We're doing none of that. We're operating on a 24-hour news cycle in which basically the president is trying desperately to cast blame away from him and take credit for things that are not he can't take credit for it, whether it's, he's going to cascade China, whether he's going to blame Dr. Fauci for getting things wrong. It's really just a 24-hour news operation for him in which he wants to get through the day. And that's a horrible way, obviously, to move through any policy issue, let alone a global pandemic that's causing the deaths of 130,000 plus Americans.
Dr. Hotez, a doctor call has been made by Sam Stein. We'll let you pick up on that where he left off.
Well, the other thing that I've done, other than being a vaccine scientist, I have a daughter with autism, and I've been going up against this terrible anti-vaccine movement for years, this anti-science movement. And so one of the things I've learned over the years doing that is I know what a disinformation campaign looks like, because that's what the anti-vaccine lobby does. And this has all of the elements of it, so that I agree, there's a lot of transactional stuff going on, getting through your day, but there's also something bigger, I think I'm seeing, which is more of a coordinated disinformation effort. You've got, the White House press briefings, Mr. Navarro, you have Secretary of State Pompeo, trying to shut down links with the World Health Organization. Peter Navarro's out there going with these very odd Chinese Communist Party conspiracy theories. And then the denial, first saying it's 99% harmless virus, saying that, the list goes on, that it's the sniffles, that, you have the White House press secretary saying that these are this massive resurgence across the southern part of the United States are embers. I mean, extraordinary language they use, that there's no deaths, that all the hospital admissions are due to we're catching up with elective surgery. This is a disinformation campaign. And I think they are hoping that enough Americans buy it that, I don't know the real motivation. I would assume it's because they want to win the election. And it's happening at the expense of what we now estimate by the end of October will be 224,000 American lives. And at that rate, we'll be looking at 300,000 American lives by the end of the year. The 1918 flu pandemic caused around 600,000 lives lost over a couple of year periods. So we're looking at something at that scale. And my question for people on this panel is, if we don't have a federal government, if we don't have the White House or the executive branch of the government engaged in doing this, do we have other options? Are there levers Congress can push? And I know you don't have to answer that now, but I think we have to start looking at this, because we will not solve this problem by just the states alone. We already know that. And even if there's regime change in January 20th, we won't have a country by January 20th. So we really need to look at this very closely.
You've taken my breath away. I'm going to let AB try to respond.
Well, I'm thankful for Dr. Hotez and everything he does to keep messaging to the public about how frightening this reality is. The virus is a tragedy, but the federal government's response and subsequent denigrating of public health and disinformation campaign are an outrage beyond description. What's so interesting is how I do believe that Congress should have not just been looking at the economic piece of this all along to try to help displaced people who were fired or furloughed, but to also try to look at some kind of intervention because of the failure, the lack of response from the federal government, from the executive branch. But what's so interesting is that a shrewd politician, Donald Trump, could have turned his entire fortunes around by gluing himself to Dr. Fauci from day one, leading a battle against COVID-19, exercising his awesome powers to use the Defense Production Act to give us everything we needed to start people en masse, to not destroy the economy, to gain credibility he didn't previously have, and to convince Americans who didn't think he could lead us through a crisis that he could. And he would have sailed to re-election. It's just astonishing to see in the greatest country on earth, not only what's happened, but that they still think that bagging on Dr. Fauci in an op-ed today on July 15th is somehow going to save them. It's beyond belief.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.